Hey friends, tonight we'll listen to a calm and soothing story that will help you relax and drift into a deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, make your bed comfortable and dim the lights. Every word and every moment will take you into a space of calm and serenity. Now let's begin the story. The year was 1883. The year America decided to divide its hours. For zones. For invisible lines carved across a continent. They called it progress. But to Eleanor Voss, a journalist for the American Weekly, it felt like taming a ghost, something that never wanted to be measured. She sat by the train window, her notebook open, her pen trembling with each rattle of the wheels. Outside, the Pennsylvania woods were drowning in fog, a thick, pale sea that turned every tree into a shadow of itself. The conductor's voice broke through the mist. Next stop, Elden Hollow. Few minutes halt. Eleanor frowned. She flipped through her itinerary. No such name. No mention in the timetables, no telegraph reference. Still, the sound of the name clung to her. Elden Hollow, like a whisper that wanted to be remembered. The train hissed, slowing. The fog seemed to grow denser, as if it wanted to keep the station hidden. She gathered her coat and stepped out into the chill. The platform that shouldn't exist. The platform was wooden, slick with dew, almost translucent in the faint gaslight. Not a soul in sight, only the sound of dripping water and the steady sigh of the train engine behind her. She called out, "Is anyone here?" No answer, but somewhere beyond the mist, a man's voice murmured, soft, distant, almost kind. "You're 1 hour early." Eleanor turned sharply. No one. Only the fog shifting in the breeze, curling around the lamppost like breath. Her watch read 6:59 p.m. She looked up at the station clock. Its hands were frozen at 5:59. A town without time. Past the station, a narrow dirt road wound down toward what looked like a small village, half hidden by trees. Curiosity won over caution. She followed the path, her boots crunching on damp leaves. Elden Hollow was quiet. Too quiet. No dogs barking. No children laughing. Just empty houses with curtains drawn and faint candlelight flickering behind frosted glass. She passed an old general store, shelves coated in dust, a sign swinging slowly in the wind. On the wall, a faded newspaper clipping. Time Reform approved, November 18th, 1883. The date caught her attention. That was today? Her pulse quickened. Was this village untouched since then? Had no one moved a thing? Then she saw it, a small clockmaker's shop at the end of the street. The only place with light still burning. The clockmaker. Inside, the air smelled of oil, brass, and something faintly metallic, like cold rain on stone. Hundreds of clocks lined the walls, each one ticking softly but out of sync, as if they were arguing with each other. Behind the counter sat an old man in a brown vest, hunched over a watch with trembling hands. He didn't look up until she spoke. "Excuse me," Eleanor said softly. "I think I took the wrong stop. Where exactly am I?" He raised his head. His eyes were pale gray, almost colorless. "You're in Elden Hollow, miss. But the train shouldn't stop here anymore." "Anymore?" she echoed. "What do you mean?" The man sighed, setting down his tools. They closed this line 30 years ago, the day the clocks changed. Eleanor blinked. That's impossible. I just got off the train. He smiled faintly, a sad, knowing curve of the lips. So did she. Who? The woman who stopped the clocks. Amara's watch. He reached beneath the counter and drew out a small, round pocket watch. It was beautiful, silver casing, ornate engravings, but the glass face was cracked, and inside there were no hands. Just an empty circle of glass, and beneath it, something faintly pulsing, like a heartbeat. Whose was that? Eleanor asked. Amara Hale, he said. A clockmaker. A genius. Or a curse, depending who you ask. The way he said her name, Amara, made the air feel heavier. She built the first synchronizer tower, he continued. The machine that made all of America's clocks tick together. The day it was turned on, time jumped. 1 hour vanished between the zones. And with it, this town. That's absurd, Eleanor whispered. Time doesn't just vanish. The old man looked past her, toward the window where fog pressed against the glass. No, he said quietly. It hides. He slid the watch toward her. If you stay the night, keep this with you. It still listens. The whispering fog. Eleanor took the watch reluctantly. It felt cold, too cold, even through her gloves. She left the shop, the old man's words still circling in her mind. By now, the fog had thickened. The lamps glowed like tiny moons, their light fading after a few feet. Somewhere distant, a clock chimed. Once, twice, then silence. And then, a faint whisper, like someone speaking behind her ear. Don't let it reach midnight. She turned, no one. Only the fog rippling. Her heart hammered. She walked faster, clutching her notebook and the strange, handless watch. The inn on Hollow Street. She found an old inn near the square, the Hollow Rest. Its sign creaked in the wind, letters half faded. Inside, dust floated in the candlelight like snow. A guest book lay open on the counter. Only one name written, Amara Hale, dated November 17, 1883. Eleanor's breath caught. That was yesterday. She signed her name beneath it. The pen scratched faintly, the ink strangely dark, like dried blood. Upstairs, the room was small and simple. A single bed, a window overlooking the fog-choked square, a candle flickering in a brass holder. She set the watch on the bedside table. It made no sound, but when she closed her eyes, she could still feel it ticking, faintly, inside her own chest. The dream of the 13th hour. That night, she dreamed. She stood again in the village square, but it was alive now, filled with people laughing, horses trotting, lamps glowing warm. At the center stood a young woman in a dark cloak, winding a great clock tower. Her face was calm, almost serene, and when she turned toward Eleanor, her eyes were blue-gray, just like the old man's. You came early, she said, smiling faintly. Are you Amara? Eleanor asked. Once, the woman whispered. Now I'm what's left of the hour they erased. The clock behind her began to spin wildly. The bells rang, not 12, but 13 times. The sound grew unbearable, and the dream shattered. Eleanor woke with a gasp. The candle was out. The room was freezing. Her watch, still handless, was glowing faintly. And from somewhere deep in the fog outside came the slow tolling of a bell. The morning came without sunrise, just a slow brightening of the fog until the world turned from black to gray. Eleanor woke in her narrow bed, wrapped in the scent of cold wood and candle smoke. For a moment, she thought the bell she had heard in the night had been only a dream. But the silence that followed was too complete, like the air itself was listening. She rose, dressed, and reached for the strange handless watch the old man had given her. It was still cold, still pulsing faintly in her palm, as if something inside it was breathing. 1. The stillness. When she stepped outside, Elden Hollow was frozen in a kind of half-life. The fog hung lower now, touching the roofs. Every window reflected her shape, but showed no movement within. A horse stood hitched to a wagon by the square, perfectly still, its breath unmoving in the air. She raised her pocket watch. The second hand twitched once, then stopped. 12:59. Every clock in sight, shop signs, tower faces, mantelpieces visible through dusty glass, read the same. She whispered to herself, an entire town stuck in a single minute. 2. The watchmaker's return. She followed the faint trail of ticking toward the clockmaker's shop she had visited the night before. Inside, the old man sat exactly as she had left him, his hands resting on the table, eyes distant. "You came back," he said quietly. "Did I ever leave?" Eleanor asked. He smiled without warmth. "No one truly does. Not after hearing the 13th bell." Eleanor hesitated. "What happened to this place? To you?" He rose slowly and motioned for her to follow him through a narrow doorway behind the counter. The air grew denser, the smell of brass and oil turning sharp, metallic. Shelves lined the passage, stacked with hundreds of pocket watches. Each one stopped at 12:59. "She made them all," he said. "Amara Hale. She believed time had a pulse, that every second had to want to move forward. She tried to give them hearts." Eleanor brushed her fingers over the nearest watch. A faint warmth answered her touch, like a sigh. "You mean she put a soul in them?" "Perhaps. Or maybe time simply borrowed hers." 3. The story of Amara Hale. He led her to a small workshop in the back. Blueprints covered the walls, intricate diagrams of gears, pendulums, and something stranger, concentric circles labeled with dates and coordinates. In the center stood a model tower made of iron and glass, the synchronizer, Amara's invention. "She built this," the man said, "to make the nation agree on the hour. But the instant it began to spin, something went wrong. 1 hour between the central and eastern lines simply vanished. The newspapers said it was a technical fault. But Amara, she swore she heard it scream." He looked up at the fog-streaked window. The next day, she disappeared. And this town, her town, was swallowed with her. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. How could an hour take a whole town? "Because, Miss Voss," he said, voice low, "time is not a line. It's a circle. When they broke it, something had to fill the gap." He pointed to her coat pocket. "That's why she left you the watch." "She didn't," Eleanor started, but stopped. The old man's eyes were fixed on her chest, on the faint pulsing light that bled through the fabric. "She did," he said. "It means she's still searching for her missing hour." 4. The photograph. On a nearby desk lay a faded photograph. Amara Hale, standing beside a tall iron clock tower under construction. Her hair tied back, her expression calm. But her eyes looked exactly like Eleanor's. For a long moment neither spoke. "You see it, don't you?" the man whispered. Eleanor stepped back. "This is absurd." "Is it? You came from a train that no longer runs. You slept in a room last occupied 40 years ago. Tell me, Miss Voss, what time did your train leave Chicago?" She fumbled through her notes. 6 o'clock. Central Time, he murmured. "And when you arrived here, Eastern Time, did you notice? You lost an hour." The room seemed to tilt. She felt dizzy, unmoored, as if gravity had loosened its hold. 5. The whisper beneath the floor. A faint sound rose from below, the steady tick of some enormous gear. The old man stiffened. "She's awake," he whispered. "Who?" "Amara." They descended a narrow staircase beneath the shop. At the bottom waited a chamber filled with moving parts, rusted gears the size of wagon wheels, pistons breathing in slow rhythm. And in the middle stood a glass cylinder filled with swirling light. Inside it hung a figure, still, suspended, her hair drifting as if underwater. Eleanor's knees went weak. "Is that what's left of her?" the man said. She tried to correct the lost hour. She entered the mechanism herself. It trapped her between seconds. Eleanor pressed closer. The woman inside looked peaceful, almost dreaming. Then her eyes flicked open. Eleanor gasped. The light pulsed once, a heartbeat echoing through the room. The clocks on the walls stuttered, then all began to tick, together, for the first time. "She knows you're here," the man said. "She remembers her successor." "Successor?" Eleanor whispered. "The one who came 1 hour early." 6. The warning. The lights dimmed, the gears slowed. The man grabbed her arm, his fingers icy. "Listen carefully. When the 13th bell rings again, do not stay. Leave this place before the minute ends." "What happens if I don't?" "Then you'll join us," he said. "You'll never move past 12:59. Eleanor tried to pull free, but the machinery around them groaned like a living thing. Steam hissed. Metal sang. And from somewhere deep inside the mechanism came a whisper, soft, female, mournful. 1 hour for one soul. The old man shouted over the noise. "Go, before she claims you." Eleanor ran up the stairs, heart pounding. Behind her, the ticking grew faster and faster until it was no longer rhythm but roar. When she burst into the open air, the fog was swirling violently, almost alive. The tower bells began to toll, slow, deep, inevitable. 1, 2, 3. She stumbled toward the train station, every chime vibrating through her chest. 11, 12. The world shimmered. 13, 7. The town that forgot time. And just like that, everything stopped. The bells froze mid-echo. The fog hung motionless. Even her own breath turned to glass in the air. Elden Hollow had forgotten to move again. Eleanor stood alone in the silent square, the handless watch glowing softly in her palm. She whispered, "Amara, what have you done?" From somewhere beyond the stillness came a faint reply, carried through the frozen air like a sigh. "Not what I did, Eleanor, what you will do." The fog followed her. Even after she fled the clockmaker's shop, even after she ran past the silent square, it clung to her shoes and skirt like something alive. The old railway inn stood at the edge of the tracks, its sign barely visible, its windows blind with dust. Eleanor pushed the heavy door open, half expecting cobwebs and ghosts. But the room beyond was perfectly preserved. The chairs arranged, the oil lamps trimmed, a guest book lying open as though waiting for a name. She hesitated, then signed her own. Eleanor Voss, Chicago Tribune. The ink bled too slowly, thick as syrup. When she looked closer, she saw another name faintly glowing beneath hers. Amara Hale. 1. The 13th bell. That night, the world was too quiet. The wind had died. The trees outside did not move. Eleanor lay in the narrow bed of her rented room, staring at the ceiling. The old boards above her head pulsed faintly with each tick of her heart. Somewhere below, a single clock was running. Tick, tick, tick. She turned to the watch on her bedside table, still glowing, still handless, still whispering in time with her pulse. And then she heard it. A low, deep sound rolling across the fog-drowned valley. 1, 2, 3. She sat up. No, she whispered. It can't be midnight again. 10, 11, 12. Silence. And then, 13. The walls trembled. The glass in the window rippled as if made of water. The watch flared in her hand, searingly bright. She clutched it against her chest and gasped. And in that instant, she was no longer in her room. 2. The dream. The floor dissolved beneath her feet. She stood in a field of gray grass that moved without wind. Above her, the sky churned like smoke, a vast clock face with no numbers, only shifting clouds. A woman stood there, facing away. Her dress rippled like ink, her hair tied in a loose braid that glowed faintly silver. Amara, Eleanor whispered. The woman turned. Her face was calm, pale, and familiar, not as a stranger's, but as a reflection. Her eyes were the same color as Eleanor's. "You're the one who came after me," Amara said softly. "The hour that replaced mine." "What does that mean?" Eleanor asked. "I don't understand." "You don't have to. You feel it already, don't you? The pulse behind every clock. The weight behind each second." Eleanor swallowed hard. "You built the synchronizer. You made time divide. You caused this." "No," Amara said, stepping closer. Her voice was like a whisper of wind through gears. "I only try to heal it." But they forced time to obey their maps. They carved hours like meat, and one bled away. She reached out, touching Eleanor's cheek with a hand that felt neither warm nor cold. "And now you carry the wound." 3. The vision of the 13th hour. Eleanor blinked, and suddenly she stood inside the tower itself. Gears spun overhead, dripping light instead of oil. Every turn echoed like a heartbeat through her bones. Below her feet, the missing hour flickered, a hollow ring of darkness pulsing faintly. "This is where it happened," Amara said. The 13th bell struck, and the world refused to count it. So it hid it instead, buried it here. "Then why me?" Eleanor demanded. "Why did you bring me here?" Amara smiled faintly. "Because you were born 1 hour too soon. Because time remembers what it loses." You are the echo of what I was." Eleanor shook her head. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Amara's image began to blur, her outline flickering like candlelight. "You felt it, haven't you? The seconds that hesitate. The clocks that stop when you enter a room. The dreams that bleed into daylight." "Stop," Eleanor whispered. "Please, stop." But Amara only smiled, gently, sadly. "It isn't me you fear, Eleanor. It's yourself." 4. The return. The sound of the 13th bell rose again, louder this time, vibrating through her teeth. The tower began to fall apart, gears tearing loose, glass shattering into endless fragments of reflected light. Amara stepped back into the darkness, her voice echoing as the world unraveled around them. "When the 13th hour returns, one of us must remain to keep it still. Choose wisely." Eleanor screamed, but the sound never left her throat. 5. The inn at 12:59. She woke to the sound of rain. The inn was quiet again. The fog pressed against the windows like a living thing. Her watch lay on the bedside table, its glow faded, but now, faintly, hands had appeared on its face. 12:59. She reached for her notebook to record what had happened, but the pages were blank. Her handwriting had vanished. Instead, a single new line had appeared in neat, looping ink. "Time waits for her." Eleanor stared at the words until they blurred. Somewhere downstairs, a clock began to tick again. Then another, and another. Dozens of clocks, all striking at once. And through it all, she heard a voice, soft, almost kind. "You're the one who took my place." The lights flickered, and the 13th bell began to toll again. Morning arrived as a pale, silver haze. Elden Hollow was still. The air smelled of rust and cold rain. Eleanor Voss tightened her coat and stepped out of the inn, the sound of her boots sinking into the wet earth echoing faintly through the fog. She had not slept, only drifted between fragments of dreams, each one filled with the same face. Amara's face, smiling, waiting. Now she needed facts, records, something to prove that what she'd seen wasn't madness. 1. The lost records. The town hall stood on the far side of the square, a crumbling brick building with shattered windows and ivy growing through its doorframe. Inside, everything smelled of paper and time. Stacks of ledgers filled the walls, railway schedules, tax ledgers, and maintenance reports, all yellowed and brittle. Dust floated through the sunbeams like ash. Eleanor brushed her fingers across the labels. Elden Hollow Rail Division, 1882 to 1883. Her heart skipped. She pulled the drawer open. Inside were pages of blueprints and sketches, some stamped with the seal of the Transcontinental Railway Company. In every document, one name repeated itself in bold ink. Amara Hale, Chief Engineer, Temporal Synchronization Division. Eleanor whispered the words aloud, barely breathing. She was real. 2. The invention. Among the papers lay a faded journal bound in cracked leather. Its first page was signed, "Property of A. Hale." The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, the kind of script written by someone who never made mistakes. November 3, 1883. The directors have approved my design for the synchronizer. A network of clocks bound by a single pulse, carried through the telegraph lines. Every station, every town, every train, all moving together. If time can be unified, perhaps so can we. Asterisk. Eleanor traced the lines with her fingertips. The ink shimmered faintly in the light, as if alive. The next page trembled slightly in her hands. November 17th, 1883, Test 1. The synchronizer is ready. At midnight, the first transmission will begin. Each clock will align, and for the first time in history, the world will share the same second. Asterisk. The final line had been slashed through with violent strokes. But something answered. 3. The missing hour. Eleanor turned another page, her pulse quickening. November 18th, 1883. The test succeeded at first. The clocks sang together, a harmony of perfect time. Then, for exactly 60 minutes, the entire line went dark. The telegraph wires hummed as though they were breathing. The air bent. When the light returned, Elden Hollow was silent. No one remembers what happened in that hour. Asterisk. At the bottom of the page was a single phrase written in darker ink. Time took its revenge. Eleanor's hand trembled. A drop of moisture from the ceiling fell onto the paper, blurring the last word, revenge, until it looked almost like return. 4. The photograph. Beneath the journal, she found an old photograph. The railway station under construction, men in heavy coats standing proudly beside a massive iron tower, the synchronizer. And in the center stood a young woman in a dark coat. Amara Hale. Her gaze wasn't at the camera. She was looking slightly to the side, at someone outside the frame. Someone standing exactly where Eleanor now sat. The faint outline of another figure appeared beside her in the photo's margin, a shadow of a woman blurred by motion. Same height, same stance, almost the same face. Eleanor's pulse raced. No, that's impossible. 5. The visitor. A floorboard creaked behind her. She spun around. A figure stood in the doorway, the old clockmaker, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "I found her records," Eleanor said, breathless. She was an engineer. She worked for the rail company. This was scientific, not supernatural. Science. The man's voice cracked. "You think time forgives the ones who try to command it? She didn't build a machine, Miss Voss. She built a door." He stepped closer, trembling. And when she opened it, something came through. Eleanor swallowed hard. What came through? Her reflection, he said softly. The part of her that believed she could fix time. The part that wanted to become it. He pointed to her chest, where the faint glow of the handless watch now shimmered through her blouse. "And now it's inside you." 6. The last entry. The man reached for the journal with shaking hands and turned to the last, nearly torn page. November 19th, 1883, final entry. They said the machine must be destroyed. But time does not die, it only hides. If anyone finds this, remember, the 13th hour is not lost. It's waiting, asterisk. Eleanor looked up from the page, her heart pounding. Waiting for what? The old man's lips trembled. For you, Miss Voss. A thunderclap shook the windows. Every clock in the building began to tick at once. One by one, their hands turned to 12:59. And somewhere, deep beneath the floorboards, the faint sound of a bell began to toll. 1, 2, 3. Eleanor dropped the journal and backed toward the door, but the fog was already curling through the cracks, whispering her name. Eleanor. She froze. Amara. The voice answered from nowhere and everywhere at once. No, not Amara. Not anymore. Night fell without warning. The fog rolled in thicker than before, swallowing every lamp post, every rooftop, until even the inn vanished behind a curtain of gray. Eleanor stood at her window, staring out into the shifting white. There, beneath the stillness, something moved. A flicker of light, a murmur, laughter, then music. It came faintly at first, like the echo of a faraway carnival, a violin's cry, the thump of wooden wheels, the laughter of children carried on the wind. Her breath caught. "That can't be real," she whispered. But curiosity, always stronger than fear, drove her to reach for her lantern. 1. The voices in the mist. Outside, the fog was alive with sound. Footsteps, chatter, the distant call of a vendor. Candied apples, fresh cider. Step right up. Eleanor walked toward the square, her lantern trembling in her hand. Shapes began to form within the mist, shadows of people in 19th century coats and bonnets, drifting like smoke. Their faces were faint, blurred, and glowing from within. They were smiling, laughing, dancing around a wooden stage where a band played invisible instruments. For a moment, it looked like life had returned to Elden Hollow. The lost townsfolk, here again, but none of them cast shadows. And when she stepped closer, her hand passed through them as if through air. 2. The carnival that time forgot. The fairground was a ghost's memory, perfectly preserved. Colorless ribbons floated midair, frozen yet fluttering. A Ferris wheel creaked slowly in the distance, though no one touched it. The smell of roasted sugar drifted past her, sweet and faintly metallic. Eleanor's heart pounded. Is this the missing hour? A voice beside her answered. It's what's left of it. She turned, and there she was. Amara Hale. The same dark coat, the same calm expression, the same eyes that looked too deeply, as though they saw not through light, but through time itself. You came back, Amara said softly. What is this place? Eleanor whispered. Amara smiled faintly. A memory caught between ticks of a clock, the hour that never ended. She looked around her at the flickering figures, her eyes filled with quiet sadness. We never left, Eleanor. The clock simply forgot us. 3. The forgotten ones. The ghostly townspeople turned toward them, their movements synchronized, gentle, dreamlike. One by one, they began to hum a tune that made the air tremble. Eleanor felt her chest tighten, tears burning in her eyes though she didn't know why. They're trapped here, Amara said. Every time the 13th bell rings, they awaken, only for the fog to claim them again. Can't you free them? Eleanor asked. Time doesn't forgive, Amara replied. It only remembers. I tried to fix the world by dividing its hours, but in doing so, I divided them. Eleanor shook her head. That's not your fault, isn't it? Amara stepped closer, her eyes glowing faintly. And what about you? Do you think your arrival here was an accident? You, with my watch, my name written beneath yours in the inn's book. Eleanor's breath caught. I'm nothing like you. Amara smiled sadly. You're exactly like me. You were chosen by the same wound that chose me. You just don't see it yet. 4. The illusion breaks. The laughter around them shifted, softened, then turned strange. The figures began to blur, their smiles stretching into silent screams as though a great wind was tearing them apart. The violin's music warped, notes bending into an impossible pitch. The fog thickened, the lights dimmed, and for a brief, terrible second, Eleanor saw what lay beneath the illusion. Bodies, hundreds of them, frozen mid-movement, eyes open, lips parted as if they'd been caught between breaths. Each one with a pocket watch clutched in their hands, glowing faintly. Eleanor stumbled back, horror rising in her throat. No, this can't be real. Amara's expression didn't change. They aren't dead, Eleanor. They're paused, waiting for time to remember them. Then release them. Eleanor cried. End this. Amara shook her head. I can't. But you might. Me? Why me? Amara's voice softened, barely audible. Because you're 1 hour early, and that hour belongs to them. 5. The trade. The fog began to close in again, swirling faster, wrapping around the two women like a living clock. Eleanor's lantern flickered violently. The light inside the handless watch on her wrist burned brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the distant tolling of bells. What are you doing to me? Eleanor gasped. Balancing the hour, Amara said. If the 13th minute is filled, the others can move again. You can set them free. But how? By staying, Amara whispered. By taking my place. Eleanor's heart froze. You want me to become you. Not become, Amara said gently. Continue. The fog roared. The music collapsed into silence. The townsfolk began to fade, their faces turning upward as if awaiting salvation. Eleanor looked around at them, their smiles, their hope, their endless waiting, and then at Amara, standing still in the center of the storm. We never left, Amara said softly. The clock just forgot. The 13th bell began to toll again. Each strike shook the world. 1, 2, 3. Eleanor reached for the glowing watch. The light surged between her fingers. 10, 11, 12. She looked up. Amara was smiling, peaceful now. 13. Everything went white.